Hello, everyone. Welcome to our monthly edition of From the District with State Senator Suzanne Weber that we do now during the interim every month. So, Senator, how you been?
I've been extremely busy. And this week I'm really fortunate because my kids are visiting. And
Yay.
so we're doing projects.
Projects. Good.
Yes. And I've got, several meetings and several commitments this week, but we're getting projects done.
Well, that's a good thing. It's when we're recording this, right, it is literally Labor Day. So hopefully you're getting a little bit of a break. Kids are going back to school. Some kids already have gone back to school.
Yes, they have. I was talking with one of the people from the Christian church, the Pacific Christian School, that's located at the Christian church this morning, and how anxious they are to get back into the groove, and new people that are going to be there, and new kids that are going to be there, and what an exciting time it is.
It is. It's also about getting into new routines.
Yeah.
Because summer is always just insane because there's kids are at home and not in their normal routines, and but it's just getting back into it, just right. Like we were doing in January.
Yes, and you know what? It's new shoes and brand new crayons, because there's nothing like the smell of brand new crayons. It's just heavenly.
That's true. I've spoken like an elementary school teacher for many decades. I never smelled my crayons, but
you can tell when you go into Fred Meyer's that they have put the school stuff out, because the smell of new crayons permeates the store.
But they do that in like July,
right? But then you get that that warm wax.
Yeah. Okay,
it's good.
It takes all kinds, so I'll give that to you. What else have you been good doing? Any other? We just had the Tillamook County Fair a few weeks ago. That's happened,
yes.
Which is huge. I know you were also.
Okay, I didn't hear what you just said.
Sorry, you're kind of garbled, Senator. You're freezing.
So are you?
Bit, so hopefully that won't. Well, that's fun. This is fun. This is going well. It's like Oregon state government in a Zoom call.
It is. It's I have done so many exciting things and talked with so many people in the last month. I went to the creamery and talked to the people there about what was going on and what kind of how the legislation was affecting them, and how additional legislation could possibly affect them. I went to the talk with the dairy people, and they had their potluck, and so we got to go and talk with them, and also listen to everything that is going to be impacting them. I got to be in some wonderful parades. I'll tell you, the Vernonia Day Parade, the Banks Parade, they're really a lot of fun, and people were so kind and so generous. And I also got to participate in a Columbia County black tie and blue jeans, where these folks raise money for scholarships for kids. And let me tell you, they go all out. They work so hard to make sure that they have got the amount of money that they're going to need. And they had some that had benefited from it in the past and told us, the difference it made in their lives. And that was really impactful. I met with 2 county commissioners from Tillamook County to talk about the future. I went and talked to the Republican women at the Tumwater Vineyard in the Tigard area. And then, of course, there was the fair. And Um, Today we were cleaning out some papers, and a friend of mine had sent me the Wall Street Journal and the New York Times when the Pig and Ford races were highlighted on the front page. And we found those. We've had Coastal Caucus meeting in between, been to the regatta parade to see what they were doing in Astoria. And I have had two really fascinating tours with the Recology people. One was in North Plains and the other one was in Astoria, to see how they are handling, the garbage that comes through or the compost that comes through. I was really amazed that, especially in North Plains, because they get all of the compost that comes from the city of Portland, how they handle it, how they treat it, how it comes in, and ultimately how it goes out. I think it's fascinating to hear about all of that. I had constituent meetings with people in North Plains and Seaside and Astoria. I got to go on a tour of a farm and the new Pacific Seafood Processing Plant, and went and observed a logging operation. And I took some pictures, and then I came back and I was just talking with my son, because my son is a debarker specialist. And so we were talking about all that goes into taking the bark off of these trees, how they do it preliminarily in the woods, and then they do it when it gets to the mill. And I was really happy to hear about how that all operated. I met with Mark Buffington from ODOT to talk about some unique problems with the plan for banks, because there's going to be a lot of construction that's going to be going on in banks. And I was very pleased after people came and talked to me about what they would like to see because of how their street at one end of town is going to be handled, that Mark took those suggestions and he went back to the planning committee, and it sounds like they're going to be honored. I got to meet the new Colt Gill, head of education, his person who's replacing him. And that was a really good conversation. I think we have a real good selection there. I got to participate in something called the Sip and Stroll that I did last year. Hampton Lumber has got a tree farm that they have made paths through, and they're lighted paths. And you take the paths and you get an evening with some of the best smoked salmon chowder I've ever had in my life. Oh, it is good. And so that what they raise there goes to the watershed. And so, it's not only benefiting the people who are coming there to have an enjoyable evening, but it's also, to be able to make sure that we are consistent in taking care of our water, especially. Got to hear about the new plans for the Astoria Public Library. I don't know if you remember, but when I was in the House, we were able to get money to be able to enhance their handicapped accessibility. And that I got to see how that was going to be used, and got to be able to tour the library, see the plans they have for the future. And then, of course, you also know that we had the 80th anniversary of the Air Museum out here.
Oh, yes.
And so got to go out and participate in that, and with all the planes in there, and have an evening then that was just like the 1940s, with the wonderful music and the dancing. And it was just a lot of fun.
Oh, cool.
We had to have a new park here in Tillamook. And that is really nice. We got to have a gathering there to say thank you to Tassie for her service to the county. Got to go to OMIC again. Am I boring you? Can you
No.
tell I've been a little busy?
Yes.
I've been meeting with mayors all up and down the coast and learning a lot about what is going on in individual communities and especially about their needs into the future. I was amazed at the things we need concerning infrastructure, especially. We have not, we've taken our water and sewer for granted for a long time.
Oh, yes.
I got to meet the head of the Moose International. He came to Tillamook, and I was invited to meet with him. And that was it was a wonderful dinner, let me tell you, prime rib. I went up to meet with Port of Garibaldi and see what kind of challenges they're facing right now, seeing how we could work together to maybe make some changes. And I also got to meet with someone from OEA, Louis DeSitter, to talk about some potential education bills that could go forward that could possibly impact financing of our schools. And I also participated in a public hearing with DEQ concerning the Dayang permit process. And so that, we can go forward, making sure that these seafood processors are going to be secure, that their plants are going to be able to be permitted by the DEQ. And there's some really interesting challenges around that. Okay, so then I went and met with Fire Chief down in South County, Chief Oder, to talk about the pressure that especially the coast has on its emergency services. When we are spending a lot of money to encourage people to come here and enjoy, recreate, and then to be able to take care of them when they have accidents or they get in a riptide or they drive off somewhere or fall down a cliff or their dog falls down a cliff. So, that's what I've been up to.
Well, that is a lot. And I think a couple of things just come to mind as you're laying all of this out. First of all, this is technically a part-time job as a senator. And I think Betsy Johnson said it well. Your predecessor said it really well. You can make this a full-time job or you can make this a part-time job. It depends on what you do. Betsy absolutely made it a full-time job. And I think you have 100% followed in her footsteps in that you are everywhere. You are meeting with everyone. And if you listen to folks, and if you didn't, maybe go back and hit rewind. So is Martin here?
It's a Martin moment, yes.
It's a Martin moment. But if you go back and listen to some of the people that she said she met with, I guarantee you there's a number of people in there that they don't get along. They don't agree on much. But one of the great things about Senator Weber here is she will meet with anybody. If there's a conversation that needs to be had, she has it. So congratulations, Senator, for a very busy August. And that's supposed to be a month, right? Well, everybody's on vacation.
One thing I didn't highlight, and these are all the things I did, and I put a lot of miles on my car. Yeah. But what other things I did was being in contact with constituents because of some of the problems that they're having individually and trying to work through some of these problems, whether it's to help get them a surgery or help get them money that they're owed from the state. All of that, it's like a spring. It just builds on itself. The people that have problems, especially getting through a lot of the government processes that are required.
Right. I will also say we got a lot of good feedback on your constituent meetings. Those of you who didn't know, Senator didn't have your normal town hall, which is just one day, and it's everybody comes. If you can't be there, too bad. And one day, one time, And quite often, a couple of people kind of take over the meeting about what they want to talk about. And
Yes.
it instead quite a number of days of individual 30-minute constituent meetings. If you wanted to have a meeting, they were given a choice of days, a choice of times that could fit with their schedule. And I can honestly hear, I think I only heard one person complain about it. Otherwise, people really appreciate it. They got actually some individual conversations. And I know those conversations were pleasant, but they got to come out and say their piece. You got to say yours, and hopefully everybody,
Right.
even if they didn't agree with what they said, felt like they were heard. And that's what really matters, that people are being heard. You guys may not always agree, but it's important that you hear what your constituents say, and not just a couple of ones, but everybody who wants to say their piece.
Yeah. What was nice was, okay, I've had the letters that have said that they're never voting for me again because of my vote on this or my not support on that, which some of them are not true as to what they've said in the emails. But, I don't often get a chance then, if they don't leave their telephone number or some way to contact them other than their, email, to be able to have an actual conversation to discuss what it is that they're exactly upset about.
Right.
Or, maybe need further explanation.
And often,
so this is an opportunity to do that.
Yeah, and often what they're upset about isn't actually the thing that they're writing you about. There's actually some underlying things that have made them upset, and you can kind of dig down and have a conversation instead of just these. You've got a couple of people, and quite honestly, it's unfortunate, but there are political opponents of yours who will take over public meetings in order to just try to get you to say something that they can use in another campaign, and that's unfortunate. That's not a good way to have conversations with constituents. So all saying, I think most everybody was very happy with these, and I think these are probably something you'll do in the future as we go forward over the next at least over the next 3 years or so. But yeah, we got really good reactions to those. You know what else we got a really good reaction to from a lot of people is the kicker that's coming.
Isn't that something?
Oh boy!
What a thought. Have you seen? I believe it's going to be in my newsletter. The chart of your earnings versus how much you're going to gain from the kicker because of the the revenue forecast about how much we're going to have in that fund.
Yeah. So the kicker, for those folks who don't know about the kicker, is that well, if you don't know the kicker, that is, I don't know what to tell you, but you should. Every biennium, legislators get together and they speak with the legislative fiscal office, the economists for the state, who predict how much money is going to come in, and it gives you folks the opportunity to budget for that biennium. If revenues come in more than 2% above, that money comes back to taxpayers. And this time around, we're going to see a record-breaking kicker of $5.6 billion.
Billion dollars.
B with a B, $1 billion coming back. This is numerous times over the highest kicker we've ever seen, and it's extraordinary, really. I have an opinion about the kicker that I'll share, and I'm interested in what your thoughts are. It's in the Constitution, so the legislature can't just come in and take back. Hi, Martin. Good to see you. I'm curious about what your thoughts on the kicker is. That we have our friends on the left who are bemoaning the kicker, are upset that that's money that should stay in the state coffers for programs.
But you have to look at the amount of taxes that the ordinary Oregonian pays.
Right, absolutely.
They do need a bonus once in a while because of how high our taxes are. Because, if you live in a state that has a sales tax, you're paying tax all the time. Every time you go into a store, everything you buy. We don't do that.
Right.
We have that tax bill that, comes to us through the cat tax and through our income tax and our property tax. And that's what supports our state.
Right.
And so it's high in relationship to a great many other states.
Yeah. So, of course, that means that folks on our side of the aisle tend to like the kicker. I mean, very big fans of the kicker. I have a unique, and I'm curious what you think of this. I have a unique opinion on the kicker, and that I don't like the kicker. And here's why. Before I get hate mail. The fact that we keep getting such big kickers, and I mean, the last one was record-breaking too, and the one before that was record-breaking. The fact that we keep getting so many kickers back says to me that we're taxing people too much. Taxes are high. If Oregonians are continuously getting money sent back to them, at some point,
something's wrong with the system.
The system is broken, that we're taking in too much money. And it's one thing if it happens every once in a while, which I think the kicker was intended for, is that, everybody just brought in a little too much this year, so everybody's going to get a $50 check or something like that, right? That's what it was meant for. This was never foreseen, that this is what this is going to be. So the fact that we're getting these thousands of dollars to everybody going back every year, that's money that I could have taken and invested and brought money back. I'm not getting interest on this. So, I'm of the opinion that if we continuously get these record-breaking kickers, it's because we're taxing people too much, and that's the part of the system that we should look at.
The other thing that this brings up is the fact that when you have that much of a surplus, people are continually looking for ways to take that surplus and use it for their own purposes. Whether and when you can't guarantee something like that, you can't guarantee that that's going to continue on. You can't commit that money.
Oh, but they do. That's just
they do.
Thing. That's the thing, is that when you create these programs, just as you're saying, because oh my gosh, look at all this money that we have. When the lean times come, the programs don't go away. So what do we then do? We raise taxes again, just these programs, and they just keep going up and up and up. When the reality is, we've existed a long time without these programs. Maybe we need them, and maybe we should take that money. Maybe we should take that money and give it back to the people who send it in.
Yes, and during this last long session, we had a real effort from our side of the aisle to request that money come back to everybody in a check, so that the state would cut it back to everybody. Well, that isn't how it works.
And I get it. I mean, that costs money to do. That costs money to do. So I understand both sides of that. While it costs money to do, I get my money back a lot sooner if I get it in a check than I do after I pay my taxes. But
because then you have to look at what that does to the economy, how that stimulates the economy by getting that money back in a check.
Oh yeah,
so
I mean, take a look at our friends up in Alaska when they, all Alaskans get dividends from oil sales. So those checks are good size. They're in the thousands. So that's when the sales happen in the local stores, because people have got the couple of $1,000 extra that they're going to go and spend. So yeah, it's in the newsletter. Hopefully you're signed up for the newsletter. If you're not signed up for the newsletter, please go to the Senator's legislative website. You can go to OregonLegislature.gov and search for the senators. And when you find Senator Weber, it's very easy and very clear how to sign up on the newsletter. If you still can't figure it out, just send an email. We'll get you in there. But there'll be a chart, as you said, of if you're making this much money, here's probably about how much money you're going to get back. And I'm calculating it out. It's about half of the money that you pay in taxes. You get about half of the money your tax liability is coming back to you. It's just extraordinary. It really is. If this does keep happening, though, you got to think there has to be a solution to this. This can't.
Yes, you're right.
And I'm hoping even our friends on the other side will recognize that we can't just keep sending back $5 billion every year. So maybe just collect a little less.
Yeah, I agree with you completely.
Yeah. So that's an update of that. That's a relatively
good news. Something else I was going to talk about is that at the end of the month now, we're going to be going back to the legislature for 3 days, days, to be able to get reports on what is happening, especially in our committees. And the additional committees that we have been assigned to are also going to be meeting during that time. So education appropriation is going to be meeting. Education is going to be meeting. Ways and Means Education is going to be meeting. Human Services is going to be meeting to see how far we have come in addressing some of the bills that were passed in the session, and what's happening to them. How are they impacting people?
So for those folks who are interested in watching these meetings, you can watch them. You can watch them on OList. They have not been posted yet, so you're not going to see them yet. But if you go to OregonLegislature.gov and you look at the calendar there in the bottom left, you're going to kind of see the basic ideas. If you go to OLIS, I'm going to actually look at it really quick. OLIS, OLIS.OregonLegislature.gov. And then click the day, which this will be, I believe, tell me if I'm wrong, Suzanne.
27th, 28th, 29th.
Yeah, 27th, 28th, 29th. It's a Wednesday, Thursday, Friday. You can watch those meetings live at olis.legislature.gov, or if, everybody's got a job, or you can watch recordings. You don't have to watch it live.
You can watch it. Exactly.
Yeah, so
and those are really interesting. The reports that they come back to us with as the progress they have made in a lot of these bills going forward. And it also is a time then when you're hearing these reports that you can look forward to maybe some ideas for things that you could propose for bills in the future.
Right. Because I know that you're going to be looking at your legislative priorities in about mid-October. So that those can get filed and can be ready for a short session next year. So again, I know we say this every time, but if you have an idea that you think would be useful, now's the time. Get it to Senator Weber so that she can vet it, she can ask around, because it's not just, oh yeah, legislation, great, put it on the books. There's unintended consequences to things. Lawyers have to look through things. Maybe it's already been done and it doesn't need legislation, or maybe there's legislation and it can be done administratively, and there's other ways we can do it. So if you got those ideas, please send them in. I think that would be really useful. And then maybe if you're watching these legislative days, these leg days meetings, if you have any questions, although the meetings are at one point in time, you can send in the questions, and then Senator Weber can reach out to these agencies and can get answers. And you might not like the answers, but you at least get them. And because a lot of times you have questions of these agencies, and unfortunately, agencies aren't so keen on just answering everyday citizens, which is unfortunate. But they do answer senators. That's in their best interest to do. So you have those questions. The senator's happy to ask this.
Yes.
Speaking of questions, I'm always looking for the next segue here. Speaking of questions, we have gotten a number of questions on a couple of lawsuits that you've been a part of as a plaintiff, not defendant. That's a good thing to point out. And they both kind of have the same basic.
Well, they're related.
They're related in that if you truly believe that people should understand what their government is doing and understand what they are doing when they're being asked to participate. So you have two lawsuits, one that you filed that you were part of during the session that talked about the readability of bills. That it is the law.
Yes.
It's the law that when there is a summary of the bill, which goes on the information sheet, it's usually about a paragraph long, that it summarizes the bill and what it does. That must be using the Fleisch-Kincaid score, which is the universal scoring of what level of grade the average 8th grader, for example, or 10th grader should on average be able to read at that level. It is the 8th grade level that those must be written in. And I will tell you, you guys came in an agreement after the denial of quorum ended that they would write these according to an 8th grade level. And they did.
Yes, and they did. They churned them out. They were well written. They were understandable. It just was gobstopping why we couldn't have done that in the beginning.
And you know what? I do this for a living. I do this for a living. I read and write legislation for a living. And it was so wonderful to read this stuff. And it was very simplistic. It was very simple. And you could ask more questions.
It got right to the core of every bill. Yes.
Exactly. And the question was, you got a lot of pushback. Well, you didn't get a lot of pushback. You got some cranky people, a couple of cranky people who said, well, sorry, you can't understand it. That's your problem. Didn't you go to college? That's not the point. It wasn't that you didn't understand it. It's that Oregonians of all education levels have a right to know what their government is doing. And it is elitist to an extreme to think that the average Oregonian should be able to read and understand descriptions of bills that are written at a law school level. And because a lot of these bills were written at 16th grade.
Yes, they were. And it was amazing to read some of these summary again and think, why didn't we just do that in the beginning? It was so much easier. But this is off of one line in the rule book. We have a book of rules that we have to follow in the Senate and in the House. And this is because of a bill that was passed in 1979. This summer, I had the opportunity to speak to the wife of one of the legislators that was in the legislature when that bill was passed. And she said how, what a groundbreaking concept that was, that you could address the needs of all Oregonians and their reading level and be understandable. And, it all came to a head because of the 2002 bill, which had many, many parts to it. Yeah, we've got Martin.
Hi, Martin. Oregon loves you. You're Oregon treasure, Martin.
Yeah, real treasure. Hey, be quiet. Come over here by me. You don't need to do that barking. Well, you heard him. He said,
Yeah, he just agrees.
But anyway, that is one line in that book of rules that we have to follow. And it's very clear, what that is. 171.134. You look it up. It's right there. The fact that was such a complicated bill. It had so many parts to it. It affected so much of our lives, our society, from unborn children all the way through to adults. And when you read that summary, you just didn't get the whole gist of it. But when it was simplified, when it was made so that people could understand it, even our folks across the aisle appreciated the fact that it had been rewritten.
Well, and again, I point to a time, one of the hearings on that bill, when it became expressly clear that one of the sponsors didn't know what was in it.
Right.
And when she found out what was in it, she audibly gasped.
Yes.
It,
Yes, because there's the
so
unintended consequences are just huge. Yes.
people who were against this were very clearly politically motivated. They were upset with the denial of quorum. They were upset with you. They were upset with the whole situation. I understand that, but that does not abdicate the responsibility of the legislature to follow the law.
Exactly.
If you don't like the law, change the law.
Right.
But they didn't do that. They didn't do that. So,
No.
so you filed a lawsuit. Where is that today? Where are we at now?
I believe we have a new judge that is going to be hearing that, and we'll know more by October as to what's happening.
So hopefully we'll
because
have
the judge that was hearing it originally is retiring, and so it's going to be given to another judge.
Got it. Well, I remember what the original judge said. Well, because you had originally asked for legislation to essentially stop and have it until this could be rewritten. Yeah. And they did not grant you that. But that had nothing to do. But they still said, I think he still said in his decision is, you're probably right. And it was a procedural issue that he didn't give you the injunction, but flat out said, you're right. You're probably right, and probably going to win. This is a judge appointed by a Democratic governor. So this is not a right-wing extremist judge saying this.
Yes.
So I think it's important when people hear about this lawsuit that people realize that there really was a good reason to file it. Sure, there were political ramifications that you wanted to happen, but it's still, the lawsuit has a lot of merit, and a Democratic appointed judge said so. So this is not all about politics. This is about good government.
No, and it is moving forward, and so we'll hear more. And then the other one is in relation to 113.
So let's talk about this. So because we were really bored on only having one lawsuit on this side, so we decided to file another one. So let's talk about Measure 113 and your thoughts on it a little bit. Measure 113 was passed by the voters in, I believe, 2020. I might be wrong on that. Might have been 2022.
No, I think.
I'm pretty sure it was 2020. I think I'm wrong. I don't remember. Everything kind of all runs together. Anyway,
yeah.
The legislature, or not the legislature, but the voters approved this bill, and it was essentially
substantially.
It was a response to denial of quorum, the true walkout. But people were leaving the state, right?
Yes. Right.
And that was very frustrating to the majority, and it was very particularly frustrating to public employee unions who wanted to work their will on Oregonians through their allies in the legislature. So they passed this bill that made sense that if a member of the legislature is absent unexcused for 10 days or more, 10 times or more, they're ineligible to run for re-election.
Right.
Now, a lot of people, even on the left, thought this was weird, that the easier thing to do here would just be to change the quorum. Change the quorum rules, which is what most states have 50% plus one have to be there to actually do business.
There's only 4 states that have the same rule that we have.
No.
The
only thing I have heard through the grapevine, I haven't seen anything. The only reason they did this is because that didn't poll very well. Changing quorum rules, that polled like at 30%, which if you're doing a ballot measure, you need to start in like the 60s at least, because you're going to go down. So they decided to do this, and their message was, if you don't show up to work, you shouldn't be able to keep your job. You should get fired. And that messaging was so popular that there wasn't even a organized opposition to it. So
no, there wasn't.
All Oregonians got the propaganda from the public employee unions saying, well, if they don't go to work, they shouldn't keep the jobs. There was no response.
The way the petition and the initiative were worded are awkward as to interpretation.
Right.
And that's what it comes down to. The other issue that I have issue with is we went into this with no rules. Yes, the Senate president okays if you're going to be absent. Yes, the Speaker of the House okays if you're going to have to be absent. But the rules are not the same. There's not one standard rule that applies to it. And so
well, I'd say there are no rules. The president of the Senate gets to choose on his own will who is excused and who is not. So if you say, let's say there is you, a popular senator in a fairly swing district, and you're from the other party of the Senate president. And the Senate president says, gosh, until we get Weber out of there, we're never going to get that seat. Exactly. Well, let's say you get cancer and ask 10 times to be excused because you have to go through treatments. Now, Senator, I'm not ever saying that President Wagner would do this.
No, but
he could. He could not excuse you. He could not excuse you and thus make it you ineligible to run. One person cannot have that much power. And I cannot tell you the number of people I came across that until this time, until you guys denied quorum, said, I voted for that. But holy crap, I didn't realize this is what it meant. And this, we're not talking about high school dropouts here. A couple of these people had doctorates.
Yes.
These were very smart, very educated people who did not understand what this bill did.
You have to look at the governor's reaction too. The governor said, I'm not going to go out and look for you, which was a great segue to us being able to continue our work. We could still do our committee work. We could still meet with constituents. We could still meet with the lobby. We were still in the Capitol doing what we needed to do. But we weren't on the floor to provide quorum.
Right.
And that's the old. We didn't leave the state. We didn't go home and, sequester ourselves in our house scared to death. We didn't do that. We went to work every day.
Right. And again,
Martin,
the number of people who have, again, smart, educated people who have come out and said, I had no idea this is what this meant. Had I known, I wouldn't have voted for it. The fact that that's happening a lot says to me, this is unclear. We need things clarified. And so that's what this lawsuit does, is ask for clarification. And that's probably going to end up in the Oregon Supreme Court fairly quickly. And we got a couple of emails. I mean, you got a couple of emails saying we knew exactly what we were doing. How dare you think how stupid the voters are? Again, that attitude is so remarkably elitist that
it is
only highly connected people who are deep into politics, because the people who are sending these, we know who they are because you get a number of emails from them. They're deeply connected to politics. They're activists.
Yes.
And it's connected to the same thing that we saw in your other lawsuit, is that there is this deep entitlement and deep elitist attitude that comes from a certain group of people that unless you are highly college educated, highly connected, and highly involved in politics, your opinion doesn't matter. And that
exactly.
You should have no access to the courts. Your legislators should come in, sit down, shut up, and do their job, and just vote. I again point out, it is your job to represent your constituents. And if there is a bill that is so god-awfully terrible that the vast majority of your constituents, you believe, don't want it to pass, it is your job to represent them by doing all you can to stop that bill from coming up. It doesn't mean you just come in and sit down and shut up, vote no.
Exactly.
I mean,
you got it. You know, it's not only, it's your constituents, it's common sense. It's whether it's legal or not. There's so many other things that need to be taken into consideration.
Right. And so again, going to those more elitist thinkers, you are gaslighting people into, oh no, the only thing legislators do is vote. And so if the legislator doesn't come in and sit down, shut up and vote, they're wrong. Or you're remarkably stupid, remarkably ignorant of how this process actually works. That time on the floor and the work on the floor is a very small amount of the work you do, as we heard in the conversation right at the beginning. Legislating, when it comes to the floor, with some very small exceptions, that skid's been greased. It almost, I think 99.9% of the bills that hit the floor pass.
Well, look at how many didn't pass. The whole session, what were there? 3 bills that did not pass, or 4?
I can only think of one, to be honest, but maybe there were more. The one I was thinking of was at the very, very end. It was actually governor's. It was a housing bill, a governor's priority, and her own party turncoated on her.
Yes, they did.
I thought it was a good bill, so it kind of made me sad. But she couldn't get enough Democrats to vote for it.
Right.
So it is sad to me, the level of elitism that comes from some people. And I think it's clear, though, that you know that they don't represent the vast majority of your constituents.
They don't. You're right.
And you are again representing your constituents by filing these lawsuits. And what they have in common is good governance and the ability of Oregonians to easily understand what their government is doing. That shouldn't be controversial. And the only reason it's controversial is if you have an agenda that you're trying to force down people's throats, that if they really, really knew about it, they wouldn't like.
You're absolutely right. Yeah.
I like hearing that. That makes me happy. My wife that. So, where is that lawsuit, Senator? The one on Measure 113. Where do you think? Where is it now, and where do you think it go?
Well, there was a complaint filed against a decision that the Secretary of State made concerning it, and I don't think a decision has been made about that presently. But if it comes back that she denies our appeal on that decision, on that complaint, then it will definitely go to a higher court.
Right. So let's also dispel some other things here, because I've heard a few. I've heard some people say that you're a short timer and you didn't plan to run for re-election. I've heard other people say that you're suing because you demand to run for re-election. In my conversation with you, you haven't, even if this were Measure 113 were a thing, you hadn't made up your mind anyway.
Exactly. Haven't made up my mind.
So you're not doing this because you want another term. You're doing this because Oregonians should be able to know what their government's doing.
It's the right thing to do.
Right. You know what? Another example that just hit me is we hear a lot from people. Well, Measure 113 passed in every Senate district. You know what other bill passed in almost every Senate district? Measure 110.
Oh my goodness, yes it did.
And you will poll Oregonians now. They hate that thing because they realize what it actually does. Yes. And I bet you do the same thing with Measure 113. when they find out what it actually does, maybe it still passes, but I think you have it doesn't pass by much, because you have a lot of folks on the independent and the Republican side who probably did vote for it, who wouldn't this time because they understand what it does now. And that's unfortunately what we've seen a lot of, is it's activists shoving talking points in Oregonians' throats against no organized opposition.
Well, you have to remember that 110, that whole initiative was financed by a group from the East Coast. It did not originate in Oregon.
Right.
But it was an experiment that was supported by somebody on the other side of the country, and we bought it.
Yeah. But I bring it up to say that just because Oregonians said yes to it once when they weren't given all the information doesn't mean they actually like it.
Exactly.
So, so we will hopefully have more information on that soon. I know you do have a number of colleagues who need to run for re-election in 2024. Yes. You do not. If you run for re-election, it would be in 2026.
Yes.
For a term that would start in 2027.
There's a lot of water over the dam before that time. Yeah.
And you got a lot to do.
I have a lot to do.
No matter, if you choose or are not allowed to run for re-election, you still have 3 years of work to do. And that's a lot of time in politics years.
Yes, it is. But and you know me, I'm not a quitter.
No,
I'm going to keep working till the last minute to make sure that people in my district especially are honored and heard and their needs are met.
Right. Right. Well, it's going to be, if nothing else, it's going to be remarkably interesting.
It is. It is. And, it's going to take a lot of money to be able to accomplish working towards a resolution to 110 and a resolution to 113.
Right.
So, you know what? It just, to me, there are going to be initiatives that you're going to be asked to sign petitions for in front of the grocery store or in front of the post office or somewhere downtown. I'm going to tell you that you need to read every single word and you don't have to sign it.
Right. You know what I tell people?
They're telling you, you need to sign this. We need to get this on the ballot. We need to vote on it. You don't need to.
No, what I tell people to do is when you ask them the petition number, it would have an IP number, an initiative petition number. Get that and say, you know what? Let me look into that before I sign anything. Go back, do some research on it, and then if it looks good, come back and sign it. There's nothing saying you can't do that.
And you have to remember, too, that the people that are out there that are strangers to you in those familiar places are most likely being paid to gather those signatures.
Right.
Both
sides do it.
Both sides do it. There are groups of people out there that are supporting these things, and a lot of them are supporting them for their own personal purposes, not for the good of the state.
Right.
You have to remember that.
Right.
Because you have to remember you have to do what is the best for the most.
Right. Well, on that note, any last minute things, Senator? Anything you got planned for this coming September?
No, I have more people that I'm going to meet with, more tours I'm going to go on. I'm going to learn more things about what's happening. I'm going to meet with more mayors about their communities. I'm especially looking into their infrastructure. If we have the opportunity to build more or grow more, we need to do that, and I need to know more about it.
Right. Excellent. Well, Senator, it is always a pleasure to chat with you.
Always a pleasure to chat with you too.
And again, everybody, we do these in the interim once a month. and include them usually towards the beginning of the month with the Senator's newsletters. So you will probably be talking to you again in October. So enjoy, hopefully, on this Labor Day, I'm going to go enjoy a nice cold beverage. And so I encourage you to do the same. Best to Matt and Chrissy. I hope they're having a great time in town.
Well, you know, we're doing something that Tom and I were always going to do. And that is we were going to give the basement a good, thorough cleaning. Because when you live in a house for over 35 years, you tend to put things in the basement rather than deal with them sometimes. And so we're making all kinds of wonderful discoveries. You know, I found my mittens that were knit for me right after I was born. I showed you that picture of the had gotten at them, and there isn't much of those mittens left.
I thought maybe Martin had got a hold of them.
I know.
They look the same if they did.
Yes.
You know, I've moved like every 3 or 4 years over the course of my life after high school. So I don't have a whole lot of that stuff. So I'm sure my time will come. But yeah, I remember moving my grandmother when I was a senior in high school, and from the house that she had lived in for about 30 years, and her attic was, I believe, much like your basement.
Yes, Robin was so amazed when they went up into the attic to look up there to see what was up there, that she had some boxes that had been put up there after high school, and she said, "Why didn't somebody tell me they were up there?" So now she's got something she can take home and enjoy too.
Well, I wish you. Cleaning out the basement does not sound fun, but I hope you'll find some fun memories that'll bring back some good memories.
Oh yes,
we've
had a really good time doing it. We've had a really good time.
All right, Senator. Enjoy your Labor Day. Thank you very much, everyone, and we'll see you next month.